Welcome. My name is Jill Jonathan, and I'm with Red Wine and Blue. We're a community of women who use digital media and friend to friend organizing to change the world one suburb at a time. And so today we are going to have a conversation with Ellen O, who is an author and the founder of We Need Diverse Books. I'm so excited about it. Joe Carducci, as in JoJo from Jers, will be joining as well. So as people start to join, then I'll be able to add those women to the conversation. Thank you so much. We've got to keep talking about books and banned books and all that kind of stuff. So thank you for joining. I Hopefully they're able to join in just a minute. There's Ellen. Hey, Ellen.
Hi.
Where's Joe? Okay, that was smooth. I feel like lately with Instagram, we've been having some trouble. And now my dog is very loud, so it must be an Amazon truck.
Or UPS.
I'm like, oh my gosh. But anyway, Ellen, thank you so much for joining us. It's Banned Books Week, and you know, we talk about books year round, but especially this week. So we really appreciate you joining us. And you know, my first question is, can you just tell us a little bit about your journey and how you became an author to begin with?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here and talk with everyone. I was an attorney first, and then I was a college instructor, and I was a college instructor as I decided I wanted to start writing, because when I got pregnant, I went looking for books for my kids because, you know, I wanted them to have the representation that I actually didn't see until I was in college, right? Because the first time I saw myself really in a book was not till I read the Joy Luck Club. Like, I mean, when I was young, there was like that, you know, the OG five Chinese brothers with the really yellow skin and the very slanted eyes. And like, after my second grade teacher read that book, in art class, the boy sitting next to me painted my arm a mustard yellow, saying that I wasn't the right color for a Chinaman. And I've never forgotten that. So to me, that was the first instance that I realized the book could be racist, right? So when I started having kids, I wanted them to have a much better experience, to find themselves in the books that were being published. And it was sad to find that not much had changed. There were books. Linda Sue Park, Grace Lynn, Lisa Yee, to name a few, were writing these amazing books, but I could literally fit them in like half of a bookshelf. I mean, that was it. So I decided that I would try to write the stories that I wanted my kids to read and kids like them to read, where they could be heroes and they could be, you know, anything they wanted in the pages of a book, in the way that I never got a chance to be, because I had this whole experience of my entire life being, go back to China, I'm Korean, you know, where they're like, you don't belong here. And, you know, that all kind of added to this feeling of not being able to feel like I was ever a real American, that, you know, I felt kind of othered all the time. And so Joy Luck Club was that meaningful moment when I recognized my experiences, even though they're Chinese American and Korean American, I recognized that experience in a book, and I was forever changed by that. It really saved me fundamentally. And so that was why it was so important that books be a part of my children's lives too. So that's kind of how I started. It was not easy because, you know, I went from being a legal writer to trying to write fiction. And like every early reader was like, your book is too, like, too unemotional. Your book is just like very boring. And I was just like, okay. So it took like 10 years to finally get the swing of it. But now I think I got it, I think.
I love that. I mean, we talk about that all the time because it's what you said and what you experienced, what motivated you to just feel seen and have your kids feel seen in books. But there's this other benefit to it too, where for other people, it's also this window into, you know, a reality that isn't theirs, that isn't the books that you said you were seeing on the shelves when you were young. I mean, that's this distorted version of you know, your heritage, and now other people get these windows into these lives as well. That's it's just
Yes, I
also
mean,
so
it's
incredibly
just this,
important, right?
like, so I really truly believe that books change lives, books save lives, right? In every way possible, in the ability for people, especially kids, to see themselves represented, right? That means so much. It can make the difference between like a child saying, I don't belong here, and I don't know if I want to belong here, right? Because we have that with LGBTQ kids, especially nowadays, feeling very much alienated, and finding that books can be that saving place, that safety net for them to say, no, there are people like me, right? They need that. They need that. And then also, everybody else needs to read about them. Everybody else needs to read about them so that they can know that this is okay. It's like when we did We Need Diverse Book, and one of my favorite kind of cards that was posted was a mom who had like 3 little black boys in superhero outfits, and she said, we need diverse books because that way you can know that we can be superheroes too. And it was just like that simple phrase of, you know, we can be anything in a book too. And then kids can be like, yeah, of course, because kids don't do that judgy thing that adults do, right? Kids will just pick up a book and read it. Like I tell this story a lot. When I was in the bookstore, I remember seeing a little white girl. She was reading a book by Christopher Paul Curtis, and I think it was called The Mighty Miss Malone. I'm forgetting the name now. Great book. And she's reading it, like she's dog-earing the pages. I'm like, she better buy that book. I'm gonna tell her mom, because my personal pet peeve, I don't like dog-eared books, but she was into it. She's several chapters into that book, and her mom came over and she saw the book and she took it away from her and said, no, honey, this book is not for you. And I was just like horrified, because I just know why she said that. She said it because there was a little black girl on the cover, right? And I don't think that this very lovely mom even knew what she was doing. I don't think she knew, right? But that's the problem.
Yes.
That's that racism that we don't even know we have inside us, that's been systemic, that we've learned and we have to kind of unlearn, is there. And, you know, kids don't have that. That's learned, right? So that's why I think that diversity in children's books is so important, because we can teach empathy early.
Absolutely. And I was just to go off of that too, you know, I have 2 children who love to read books, and I don't want them to be centered at every book in every book that they read. So that's really important to me in that way too. So I'm really glad that you brought that up.
And I think that kids want to root for anybody. Like,
Yes.
you know, that's the beautiful thing. They can root for a talking crayon or a talking gorilla, you know, like, that's not a problem. So why do adults have an issue then, right? If
Yeah.
they want to read about a black kid or an Asian kid or a Latina kid, you know, it's kind of like, let's make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like, then to hear from you, you know, what is it you think is behind this push to remove these books, to
You know, I
limit the
think
access our kids
that we
have
have
to
to
them?
start by taking a look at the progress that we've made, right? Because banned books have always been around. People have been upset about books for a long time. But in 2014, We Need Diverse Books was first launched. And at that time, only 8% of books in children's literature that were published in a year were written by authors that were Black, Indigenous, people of color. So we're talking about, that was 2014, less than a decade later, we've seen that number jump to 45% annually. And I will say that's a 5-fold increase, which is directly tied to all of our advocacy, our mentorship programming, our programming that gives out grants to diverse authors and illustrators. Angie Thomas was our very first grant winner. Angeline Booley was also one of our winners, like you're talking about The Hate You Give and The Firekeeper's Daughter. We've made a difference in the industry, right? Not because of us alone, because we're a grassroots organization, because so many people cared. When they got the message that these diverse books were important for kids, everybody got together, and it made this movement a success, and publishing listened. So you see this huge increase in diverse books being pushed out. And so it's not actually a surprise to see the pushback, right? It was always there, right? They were more quiet when there were less diverse books, but all of a sudden diversity became a thing. The New York Times bestsellers list had more diverse books than ever. It started to get in their faces and they pushed back. And I think that we have to be honest about what is driving it. It's absolutely prejudice, hate, fear, racism. I mean, I know that these people believe they are protecting children against bad things, but given their focus is on LGBTQ plus authors and BIPOC authors, it sure feels like they're saying our existence is evil, right? It sure feels like they just don't want us to have any happy ever afters. We shouldn't have happy ever after stories. Like, we don't deserve it. I don't think that they want to think of it that way, but that's how it comes. Like, we have to talk about impact, no matter how much they say, no, our intent isn't racist. It's not fear. It's not hate. Yeah, you say that, but look at the impact. The impact is harmful. The impact is hateful. And I think the worst part is how deceptive their campaign is, because it's like based on lies and misinformation and controlling a very specific narrative. Like, if you really look at what they're doing, they go in with books that they accuse of porn and like sexual content and grooming and race baiting, fear mongering, all of this. And it's a few books. And then what they do is they slide a list of hundreds of books and they go, and ban these two while you're at it, right? Yeah, let's just take all these books out. And these books include books like Dim Sum for Everyone, Babies Everywhere. Like, you have done that. What is that bait and switch thing? Oh, yes, look at this adult book that has this content. Look at this young adult book for older teens that has this content, pretending like that's actually seen in elementary schools, and then switching out and throwing all of these BIPOC books, LGBTQ plus books, because that's their goal always. And that's really what's so troubling and really just actually awful.
Yes.
And you say about, your nonprofit, We Need Diverse Books. You say books save lives.
Like I keep saying, especially in this country, bullying and that feeling of not belonging leads to a lot of, self-harm, self-hatred in marginalized kids. And like, we need to protect the most endangered kids. And I think the statistics are like LGBTQ plus kids right now are the most endangered of bullying and attempted suicide. So if we don't support them, if we don't give them the books that can help them and save lives, then we're not doing our job to raise a better future.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And, we've talked to other authors. Becky Albertalli was one of them. And she was saying, and you kind of touched on this in the beginning, if people are saying that just your existence is, is like harmful or is, I'm trying to think of the word that she used, but it's like, her characters and a lot of her books are LGBTQ. So if you're saying just their existence in general is wrong, what is that telling someone? I mean, that has some major impacts there. And that's exactly what you're saying. It's incredibly harmful and it's super scary too.
It is so scary, especially when you see state legislators getting behind passing laws, and it's as like, how do the kids survive in those states? They can't. They feel unsafe. Like I do a lot of school visits across the country, which have been canceled, and I have much less now because librarians are afraid. But when I did do the school visits, I'd go every time to the library, and it was always the school library where those kids would be there and they'd feel safe because this was their haven. This was a place that they knew that they could be who they are with no judgment. And I'm afraid that so many kids now are losing those safe spaces.
I know. It's so sad. And, you touched on like the fear. That's the thing that I find incredibly concerning as well, is when then you start installing fear into teachers who maybe would keep certain books in their classroom library are now scared to do that. Librarians who are scared to carry those books. There's a problem here. And so I think with your organization, we need diverse books, which is incredible, which I had heard of before we contacted you. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, she's like a founder. I have one of the t-shirts too. But I just think, what are some things that we can do to support, authors and librarians and teachers when they're going through like this crazy time of being threatened and fearful of just like having a book in their classroom or writing a book?
I mean, your organization is already kind of doing that because you're out there, you're advocating, and that's so important because getting people informed is the number one thing that we have to do. It's kind of amazing to see how much that misinformation has settled among people who would be against book bans, but then they're like, but porn is bad. And I'm like, okay, but you know what? That's actually not what's happening. So like, there's a lot of misinformation out there. So that first step always has to be talking to people, educating them, telling them what actually is at stake, right? And then the second thing is really, we got to support our teachers and librarians. They are scared. They're afraid that they're going to lose their jobs. They're getting death threats. I mean, this is insane. Like, whoever thought, well, actually, teachers in general have become dangerous. It's a dangerous occupation anyway these days. But on top of that, harassment from parents who don't believe that their kids should be subjected to the books about Black, Indigenous people of color, about LGBTQ plus, like, because they shouldn't exist. Like, I'm sorry, I'm getting worked up, but it's such an emotional thing, right? It's so upsetting. And I think that teachers and librarians are on the front lines. They need the most help. And that means showing up at school board meetings and library board meetings, showing up and letting people know that it's a minority that is actually trying to enforce the book, right? It's a minority that's well-funded, that has a script, that has resources, that hire people that to go into these school boards, to these library boards, and just like wreak havoc. And our job is to get as many people in the community to come out and support our librarians and our teachers. Like, no excuses. We got to get out there. We got to mobilize. We got to do what we can. And, like, the kids can get involved too. And in fact, I find that teen advocates are better than the parents. In a lot of cases, they care. They are at the meetings. They're talking out. And they're being attacked by adults, which is ludicrous, right? So, but there's a lot we can do. We can do a postcard writing campaign, get everybody involved, write postcards, say, don't ban these books. Say, this banned book is my favorite book. Explain why it's important, and then just inundate your local congressmen, inundate them, just let them just send a barrage of postcards and emails. I just don't think we should let up because they've been so good at kind of keeping that narrative strong for them, right? Because people always are more driven by fear, and so they kind of hit that sweet spot. Your kids are being influenced to, are being groomed, they're seeing porn, they're all this like negative stuff. Our message is much more positive. So sometimes I think the positivity gets overwhelmed by the negative fear mongering. So I don't want to give into fear mongering, but we have to get everybody involved. That, all of us can do something. And it's actually uncool. It's just not right for anyone to sit there and not do anything.
Yeah.
In some way, we can be involved.
That's what I feel like as you're talking. I keep thinking, like, we can't sit this one out.
No, we can't.
Like, listen, nobody can sit this one out. We've got to use our voices. Joe, I know you had a couple of like really good questions. I didn't want to like take over, but
no. Sorry,
my
internet is being very squirrely today, so I apologize if it's squirrely now or it dropped me off before. But I just want to go into that idea of fear mongering, and then I did have another quick question. But like the fear mongering that's actually in certain states like Georgia, it's actually giving the power to that small minority of parents. And we saw a teacher fired for reading the book My Shadow is Purple, because I think one parent essentially complained that her child had been exposed to this book that was actually already approved within the board's curriculum. And it's like we're giving into those minority voices, and I don't think a lot of Americans really know these things are happening. So like there is so much power in us having these conversations because we're drawing attention to what people probably think is like, no, that's not happening. No way, you're being silly.
Exactly. I mean, we're in the era of people always going fake news. Like that's the first, oh, that's fake news. Oh, you're lying. And they don't realize what's happening, right? It's like that first time that teacher showed the empty bookshelves in Florida. People were like, no, that's fake, right? And he got fired too. Like this is what's happening out there, and knowledge is power. And the more information we can share and the more people we can get to understand that this is a crisis. This is, like people are like, oh, listen. And I've had people say this, banned books is the least of our problems. Look at all these other problems we have. And I'm like, they are all related.
Yes.
They are all related, right?
Yep.
You ban books, you lose the education to teach the kids who will then go fight for your fundamental rights. This is what they want. They want an uneducated populace.
There you go. Yep.
Information is the most powerful weapon we have in our toolkit. It really is. And the suppression of it is designed, right, to grasp power essentially and control, because when we don't have information or access to it, then we have to trust what we're told by the people who do. And it's a whole thing we've seen play out throughout the course of history.
Exactly. And we know that they will manipulate that information in order to manipulate us. So like, I mean, like we have to support our local journalists more than ever. Like what we hear coming out of different states, that's not national news. Those are local journalists going out there and sharing news. Like I just feel like this suppression of information is everywhere. You're losing our journalists, you're losing our teachers and librarians, and we're losing books. Like this is a concerted effort to have a certain type of citizen in the US.
Yeah. And the quick follow-up is a bit of a pivot, because not only are you this incredible advocate for diverse books, but you're also an amazing author. And that's another hat you wear around. I'm just kidding. That's your side hustle, right? No, I'm also kidding. But I wanted to ask you about this book because it's so amazing to me. You are here connecting flights. It's 12 Asian American authors all writing interwoven stories stemming from the same catalyst. And I want to know how that process worked, because it sounds amazing, because it's essentially the stories overlap, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they are all completely related. So it was so much fun. First of all, what you have to do is you have to have the best authors who are also your good friends come together, agree on what we're writing. And agreeing on what we were writing was kind of easy because this was a pandemic book. I mean, this was like literally as we saw Asian hate and Asian violence rising everywhere. Like this was the book that we wanted to work on, because like, I mean, let's face it, Asian hate has always been around, but it was highlighted so vividly during the pandemic. And so we wanted a book that would say, hey, we see you, kids, Asian American kids, we see you, and everyone else should see you. Like you are American enough, right? Because like going back to that whole, we never quite felt like we're American enough because we live in that weird divide between not being Asian enough and not being American enough for some people. And so we have to kind of like forge our own identity, and that's being Asian American. And that's something to be really proud of. And it's so diverse within the Asian American community. So, I got a bunch of like wonderful Asian Americans writers together, and we had a lot of fun. We put together a series of stories that really kind of interconnect. Christina Suntavai got the first, she wrote the first story, and I got the last, and we just connected it all. And like one of the best experiences of my life as a writer, hands down, which by the way, writing is where I make my money, and that's my side hustle. Because we books is completely volunteer.
Right. Incredible. I love it.
I love how you said, Asian American kids deserve to be seen, and they deserve to have others see them as well. However you worded that, I like really resonated with that, and I think that's incredible.
I think that is the theme about diverse books, right? It's not only to feel seen, but it is to be seen. It's both, and that both is so important. And what's happening is these book banners want to take away the ability to be seen, but in the process, they will also take away the ability to feel seen, because publishing it's an industry, right? It's a business financial model industry. They need to make money. And what these book banners are doing are causing irrevocable harm on writers. We're not seeing it yet because it's a slow industry, but in a couple of years, if we don't fight back, you're going to see that number that we've worked so hard to get up start to fall again. And we'll be back to we need diverse books numbers. And I think that's a sad thing, I really do. I think that it harms all children, not just marginalized kids, but
100%.
Especially,
it really does.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Jill.
Especially since it literally goes up against the curve that is our evolving sort of like, diversity in this country. So it's like the reality is being denied more and more, and it's like that. The kids are going to go out there and see the world that doesn't look like what's on their shelves because it's been denied them. So there's so much of a disconnect there, and it's so dangerous and dismantling to like a functioning society, because there's so much on so many layers. And then the more diverse we become, the more they try to restrict our access to the diversity that's reflected in our literature. It's crazy.
Absolutely, you're exactly right. And then to take it a step further, they forget that diversity is everywhere. I mean, we are all about intersectionality, right? They're forgetting their kids could have mental illness. They could have depression. They could be bipolar. They could be LGBTQ+. They are forgetting that. And in their like rush to like ban all of these books, they're denying these safety havens for their own children. Because want that for my child is perfect. My child has mental health issues. We all came out of a pandemic. Everybody has mental health issues. If you look at the books that are being banned, they are also going after books with serious topics about depression, about suicide, attempted suicide, about self-harm. Like those are the books that they are targeting too, as if they do that, it will not be a problem, and it will all magically go away. These books can give these kids the ability to find themselves and say, oh, I'm not alone. This feeling I have is, not just me, and it will help them, right? And like, hey, let's be honest, a book has a lot more safety measures to get published than the phone that these kids have in their hands as they scroll the internet. And that part always just like amazes me. Do they not realize that?
I know, I think about that a lot too. And I'm like, I have a teenager and an almost teenager, and our kids are not as fragile as these people are saying they are. I mean, they're separate human beings from us who are living their own lives. And like, think about what you were like as a teenager. Like, they can handle this stuff. And like you said, it's not almost, it is a safer way to read it in a book than find some, I don't know, whatever they're finding on the internet. So yeah, it is bonkers.
And then, okay, last thing on this, right? Okay, you want your kids to read certain books and not others. I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. You should parent your kid. That's wonderful. Why the are you trying to parent my kid?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you trying to parent everybody else's kid in the process?
Mm-hmm.
This is not how, you know, liberty works.
Right. And then they, coin it as parental rights.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, what about my parental rights?
Yeah.
I want my children to have access to these. So that's my parental right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Parental rights doesn't mean that I have the right to parent your kid.
Right.
It means I have the right to parent my kid and you have the right to parent yours. I'm not making those choices for you kids. I'm not their parent. Don't make them for mine. It's just that simple.
Yeah. It's fundamentally simple, and they don't. Well, I mean, I think it's just like purposeful denial on their part.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like saying, well, but we don't trust your parenting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is kind of what they're saying. Like, but we don't trust your librarian. We don't trust our teachers. We need to have oversight on them. Yeah, we know what's best. The librarian went to school and studied this, and the teacher went to school and studied this, and they've been very deliberate care to do what they're doing, but you know best.
Sure. You're saying that, right? I mean, our librarians and teachers are like, they go under extensive education, but I'm supposed to listen to Mrs. Robinson over here who doesn't know anything about teaching or libraries, but knows that this is a bad book.
Like, would she walk into a doctor's office or a surgeon's office and be like, I know you're a surgeon and I know you went to medical school, but actually, I know how to do this operation better than you do because I'm a mom.
Exactly.
It is. It's about trust and yeah. Oh my gosh. So many incredible things that you said just in this short half hour. Joe, do you have anything else before we wrap up?
No, I just wanted to add that I loved I read about your Stephen King thing about how you kind of like really jumped into Stephen King books. And I was a 11, 12, 13-year-old kid who I love writing, and Stephen King is responsible for all of that. Like, I read everything he ever wrote forever. And you talk about that too. And you even have like a horror book for young adults, I think, or for kids, right?
I do. But I started with Lois Duncan.
Okay.
I Know What You Did Last Summer, Stranger with the Face. I read every Lois Duncan book, and then I jumped to Stephen King. And it's all my father's fault, because my dad was the one who would always talk about scary myths and legends of monsters and goblins and like just ghosts and demons that love to eat naughty children that were always Ellen. And because of him, I ended up like really loving horror, and I became a parent that liked to scare my own children. They all go to therapy, but not quite for that. But then I started writing scary novels, and I realized that I had the ability to scare other people's children too, and that's my greatest joy. Although I'll be honest, the kids, when I meet kid readers, they're like, it's not that scary. But the librarians and the teachers are like, oh my gosh, I couldn't sleep last night.
Oh my gosh. I love your story from, lawyer to writer. And just before we wrap up, something that really stood out to me as you were talking was, a lot of times we see something and we're like, I wish somebody would do something about that. And you're somebody who was like, me, I'm going to do something about that. I'm going to write the kind of books that I want my kids to have. So I think that's incredible. So
Thank you. And I think that's a message we have to tell our kids, every single kid out there, because they, it really is one person can make a change.
Yeah.
It's amazing, small, little, but every single one of us can do that. And I think it's wonderful to tell kids that, because you empower, you let them know that they can make change in the world, that sometimes they feel like they don't have a lot of power in.
Yeah, you have more power than you realize. And where can people, I know you have your own website, and then We Need Diverse Books have a website too. So where can people find you?
Me? Oh, well, I'm on Instagram, LO Echo. I'm on TikTok. I think that LNO, and I don't know what Twitter and X is anymore. I'm on there too. I have a website. What was I gonna say? And We Need Diverse Books is, has a website and all the social media too. We're on TikTok and Instagram also. So follow us, and if you can support We Need Diverse Books in any way, I would be forever grateful, because we are working hard to fight the banned books.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for your work. Thank you everybody for joining. This was incredible. And I will save this conversation on our Instagram account so you can rewatch if you want to. So, all right. Bye everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.